So the biggest thing that comes to my mind first is my daughter. It was a number of years ago, probably in 23, somewhere in 2023. She said, "Dad, I'd like to go with you on a big hunt." Well, I'm Jerry Gingrich. I'm a hunter ed instructor, and ironically, my dad was a hunter ed instructor, so I took the class at 12 years old, and for some reason, I was very excited about hunting. My oldest brother, we all hunted as four of us brothers were hunters, but my oldest brother, which I'm the youngest of the four, he was a professional hunter, trapper, and fisherman, and I learned a lot from him. She said, "Dad, I'd like to go with you on a big hunt." And well, I wasn't sure exactly what that meant, and I kind of forgot it. But then later, probably a year later, 24 more or less, she said, "You know, Dad, I remember I said I'd like to go with you on a big hunt." And so I didn't forget it that time. Yeah. I had an opportunity to sign up for this goat hunt, and I put two and two together, and I called her or texted her and told her, "Hey, how about doing a fall goat hunt? Would you be interested?" And so she said, "Yeah, why not?"
What drove you past just getting the meat for this hunt?
Well, the camaraderie, time spending with my daughter, that was, and enjoying the outdoors. I really love the outdoors. It's just something about the outdoors that I enjoy, and especially when you can share that with a family member or a close friend. You know, there's a bonding that takes place. I was never a guy that just was satisfied with mediocre. I wanted to go above and beyond the norm, the status quo, you know, and out of the box. And so my dream is to conquer, you know, to fill more of those big game exotic hunts, or not exotic perhaps, but unique hunts, yeah. Well, I was pretty confident, you know, that I was going to be able to come out of it successful, but you never know. You know, there was a couple of weeks there prior to the hunt that I'm like, am I crazy, or what did I sign up for? You know, I'm like, I had all these doubts and misgivings, but then as the time got real close and we actually started packing and getting my gear ready and all that, it was coming. It was going to be a reality, you know. But I had no idea what the terrain was like and all that, and what the guides were. I never met. I did meet the senior guide, but the two guides that actually went on with us, I had no idea who they were, but it turns out they were nice guys, Kai and Jack. They were both in their 20s, and they both went above and beyond what they had to, you know, and they really made it a good, meaningful hunt. We're going to fly to Kodiak, from Kodiak to base camp on Saturday. Well, it turns out it was windy, and we weren't able to fly that day. I still remember the disappointment. I was so into it. I had met the guides, and we were ready to fly. You know, had everything ready. We're having breakfast there at the motel, and we were ready to go. And then Joe, which turned out to be a lady, I thought it was a guy, she texted and said that it's probably not going to be a fly day. It's too windy. And then Sunday morning, the weather was good, and we were at the boat dock. Got the plane before it was even daylight, and so we got on the plane and took off. It's about an 80-mile flight. The island itself is about 100 miles long, and it was an 80-mile flight. Beautiful flight. The sun was coming up, and it was just absolutely gorgeous when that flight going over the snow-capped peaks, and one of the guides poked me from behind and said, "There's a bear." And so there was this big brown bear running along the beach as we were coming in. And so that was our first sighting of a big Kodiak brown bear. We landed and loaded all our stuff on the raft and took it to the camp, and we regrouped there and loaded our backpacks and headed for Spike Camp that afternoon. Now, we were not able to hunt that day, with the exception of the deer. It's legal to hunt the deer on a fly day, but the goat it's not. So anyway, Spike Camp was about 3 miles from base camp, and it was a fairly easy hike. It was some altitude gain, but not a lot. But as we were going there, we would stop and glass a lot for deer, because we knew that we were able to kill a deer that day, but we weren't really, into it. We had a lot of time that day to get to Spike Camp. But we were probably 2/3 of the way there. We looked up, and there was a sow and 2 cubs up on a peak, and that was pretty interesting, It's only about a mile away. They never saw us, but we were in plain sight. And so that was interesting. And there's no trees on where we were hunting. South Kodiak, where we were, there was no trees. I was shocked. You could see for miles. And so the goats were not where they typically find them, but still they were in that area. So we went on and got set up at Spike Camp, and we weren't there very long. We saw another sow and 3 cubs, and that one was even closer than the goats. So that one's probably also a mile away. I forget, maybe a mile and a half. But anyway, we watched the goats from Spike Camp until it got dark, and that night was, of course, a lot of anticipation and looking forward to the next day. And so the next morning, which was Monday morning, we got up, and the goats were still there. They were moved. And so we got up and walked right up the drainage towards them, plain sight. We were in the shade. We had the sun to our right and the mountain on our right. We were in the shade, but we walked right up in plain sight of those goats. We were getting close. That's when the climbing started. Going up the first drainage was not that hard. But when we went left up into the, started gaining some altitude, that's when I fell behind. And but it wasn't too long. I noticed that Charity's kind of falling behind too, and she was, she's wasn't used to mountains, but I noticed she was falling behind, and I caught up with her, and finally, and she said her face was red, and she was puffing pretty good, I noticed, and at one point she said, "You better not miss." So I'm like, okay, I get the message. You're tired. You didn't want to do this again. Finally got up to where we were about 320 yards, and that's about as close as we could get to them. We were able to peep over and watch them with the scopes. And so I got in position and dialed my scope into 320 yards, and I felt very confident. I knew that this was not going to be an easy shot, but still I was fairly confident. And so they laid down. The goats laid down. The billy laid down. There was about probably 20 of them at that point. And there was a hot nanny, and he was laying right kind of behind her. And his head was kind of over her rump, though I couldn't shoot. It was too dangerous the nanny was too close. So I got in position and just waited. We probably waited 10 minutes, more or less. And then she got up instead of him, and that actually cleared the shot. So where his vitals were exposed, and I asked the guy, "Can I shoot?" He says, "Yeah, if you feel ready." And so I got very comfortable and touched off and ended up spining him. The shot was a little bit too high, so of course wanted to get him expired as soon as possible, and I was a couple times just ready to pull the trigger again, and he went behind a rock, and then after the rock, he got out, and I was again ready to pull the trigger, and he started rolling. And fortunately, it wasn't rocky. It was, grass and so forth. But that's when I got excited. That's when I got shaky, and I got set up to shoot again. He stopped, and I missed him twice. Twice I missed him, and then I realized, you know what, I need to calm down and just take my time. And the third round is when I hit him, and he went down. But we got down to him and realized that he's still not dead. He must be a tough old bugger. And we got down to him and had to give him another round, and that finished him off. But yeah, that was a relief. That was a tremendous relief. We ended up setting up, taking pictures, of course, and we skinned him and butchered him, and I was able to pack out the hide and the head, and it was just a really relaxed, wonderful day. It's just such a feeling of accomplishment. The hunt is more than the kill, but that was still the big part of it, was to be able to actually do what you went to do, and with the whole experience of a beautiful day. And so we packed it out, and we got back to Spike Camp probably 3 p.m. or so, 2:30 or 3, and had lunch and regrouped, and we thought, you know what, how about we go up to this ridge behind camp and kind of in the opposite direction and see if we can't spot a deer. We were probably 20 minutes up there, and we spotted this nice black-tailed deer. He was coming at us. We had the doe down below us to the right, and he was coming from the distance, and the wind was blowing, and I think she was a hot doe, and he kept moving in towards her. He had her in his focus. So I was set up to shoot him at 200 plus yards, but he just kept coming and coming. So I waited, and he got down below us, and I had to shoot that one left-handed because of the hill. The hill was this way, and for me to get right-handed and shoot downhill, it just didn't work. I had a terrible time getting set up, but when I got set up left-handed, it worked out really good. He kept coming in, and all of a sudden, he heard us or something, and he picked up his head and looked right at us, and I decided, now's the time, now or maybe not at all, who knows. So he looked at us, and I let him have it, and he just dropped. It was, at that point, he was only 100 yards away. First day, Monday, filled both tags. Beautiful day. It was just an amazing, amazing experience. It ended up being a 3x4 blacktail, not counting the brow tines, which is a fairly decent blacktail. The plan, at that point, we revised the plan to go back to base camp, pack everything back to base camp. And we got back there around lunchtime to base camp. And here's another interesting story. We shared camp with another hunter, and was after a bear, a big, he ended up getting a big one. And Charity actually heard the shot. It was right close to the time, within an hour of when I killed my Billy. And that thing rolled and ended up in a crevice, upside down, and the 3 guys could not pull him out. He was it was over a 10.5-foot bear. And so they left him. They left him that night, and that was the same day that we killed, Monday morning, that he killed that. And the next day, 5 of them went back there. Charity and I hung out at base camp, but 5 of those guys went back there to pull him out of the crevice and skinned him. But it was they ended up getting a real neat picture because he was in the crevice, and so his legs were up, right? So that it got stiff, and his legs were up straight. And when they got him out, his leg was still sticking up straight. So they got behind that and made for a real good pose. And that was a neat story too. That was fun. So that was Tuesday, as I recall. And we had the plane scheduled to fly in Tuesday evening at about 4 p.m. to take out the bear hide and Charity and myself and the goat and the deer and all that back to Kodiak. And we did have satellite there or Starlink at the base camp, so we weren't there very long, and the guide said, "Doesn't look like we're getting out today. It's too high winds." And then he started looking at the forecast, and the forecast was like for 3 days of this wind. And so we ended up sitting at base camp. Charity and I slept in the tent right next to the cabin, and ended up spending 4 nights and 3 days there, just waiting for the wind to die down. So it was Saturday morning before we got out of there. And I mentioned something about 3 days and 3 nights, spending at base camp. It was a relief because we had the tags filled, and it was all good. We enjoyed the hunting stories and everything, but I mentioned the 3 days and 3 nights, and Charity said, "Yeah, it's like 3 days and 3 nights being in the belly of a whale." I wasn't sure what to prepare for. I didn't know what our accommodations were going to be, at how much we're responsible. We did have a checklist, or a gear list rather, that we followed. And so the temperatures, I did look at the forecast, up there and what the temperatures were going to be. And I was fairly prepared, but I probably didn't really allow enough clothing for Charity. She got colder quicker than I did. I got a couple years ago, I bought this 300 Browning PRC with shooting 212 grain bullets with this hunt in mind. I know it's a little big for a goat perhaps, but when you're out there, you want to be prepared for anything. And I do want to be able to use it for a brown bear. Hopefully the next time on Kodiak, it'll be for a brown bear. I don't know when, but that's on my bucket list to go back to Kodiak with a brown bear tag. So I got home, and we were still in hunting season here in Montana, and didn't have all my gear, but fortunately I had enough gear with what I had at home that I was able to hunt here, and ended up filling my elk tag here in Montana, and later cow tag as well locally. So that was fun. Had a very successful year, 2 elk, and also filled a small whitetail deer. So yeah, 2 elk, 2 deer, and a goat. Made for a pretty good year. So I did, yeah. It was, her and I made a trip to the Middle East a couple years ago, and that was bonding, of course, and then spending time with her, and she's also an out of the box thinker, and she's up to challenges. She's literally traveled around the world, and in various, on with her and her friend. And so she's not afraid of challenges, and when she sets her mind to something, she'll do it. Might take her longer than she expected, but she's very goal-oriented and thinks a lot like I do. And so I'm thinking that if she goes again with me, she'll be a tag holder. So this was, of course, just kind of a ride-along for me, and doing some of the videoing and pictures and stuff, but I'm thinking that she's going to want to get into the hunting as well. So I wouldn't put her past her to go somewhere and kill something big one day.